Hey guys, one of the things I wanted to talk about regarding the martial arts techniques that I might be demonstrating involves stances. Now, if you're not really familiar with the martial arts, there's a difference between what are normally called traditional martial arts and the things that are more modern in terms of mixed martial arts as it's presented today, UFC stuff, a few different modern types of kickboxing, etc. In terms of the structure and what may or may not be emphasized. I have a pretty strong formal martial arts background. I've done some non-formal or informal stuff as well, but my primary martial art that I've been taught is a form of Taekwondo, which is a Korean martial art that's really well known for its kicks. And I love doing the kicks. I love it. It's fancy. It's cool. It's a great way to, I think, great way to get in shape. The discussion about which techniques may or may not be practical in a street fight or in a self-defense scenario, I'll save for another time. A lot of people have strong opinions about that. But one of the great things, I think it's great, that I was taught early on was how to do certain types of stances. The stances are foundational or fundamental positions from which you throw different techniques, or from which you apply different techniques that you're taught. And it teaches you how to have a stable foundation. If your feet aren't stable, if you're not able to put force into the ground really well, you're not going to be able to put force into your target very well. Because that force that you're delivering with a punch or a kick or a block has to come from somewhere. It's not just coming out of thin air. You've got to be able to push off of something else to get force forward into that, whether it's a person or a board or a brick or a pad or a bag or anything that you're trying to strike. So that's a very important thing. And there are three fundamental stances I wanted to talk about. And hopefully the explanation here will make some sense. Now I found these shorts. I apologize, I don't have pretty legs, I know. But I wanted you to be able to see the positions of my ankles, my knees, my hips. So you need to see a certain amount of leg, I think, for that to happen appropriately. Anyway, we would often start in my Taekwondo classes when I was a white belt. From then on, we would start at attention, right? Not that anybody needs to know that. And then we would go to what's called a basic ready stance. And then from here, we would move into the different three, what I'm going to call active stances. It's a term that I'm just going to use for those. The first one that we spent a lot of time learning, if I recall correctly, was the front stance or a forward stance. And it's called that because you tend to use these stances to deliver force forward or to address something that's happening in front of you with a block or with a strike. But it's basically, imagine taking a long step forward. Notice that width-wise, I got about a shoulder width between my feet. Let me back up so you can see my front foot. But it's something like this, right? I got about a shoulder width between, I'm not twisted up. My body is pretty much perpendicular to the direction I'm stepping in. So if I'm walking forward, my body is even side to side. I don't have one shoulder in front of the other. My front knee is almost looking from my perspective like it's coming over the toe. I'll show you from the side what it looks like. And I got about a 50-50 weight distribution between my legs or between my feet. So I'm not really leaning forward on this leg. It's not really like a forward lunge, though it appears a little like a lunge in a way. It's not quite as deep, and I'm just doing this to create a good foundation. My back knee is straight, if I can get it straight. My back foot is turned down at a slight angle, but it's not way out like this. I'm turning it forward as though I'm trying to push forward with this back leg as well as the front, right? So from the side, it'll look something like this. Here we go. You notice my back leg is straight, relatively straight. You may sometimes see it slightly bent, depends on the art you're studying, but there is some merit to learning how to lock that leg out when you're delivering a technique. Push hard through the back leg and you can get more force into the front of your body, into the punch or into whatever you're doing. But try to keep this straight. Now, you may not have the range of motion you need at the ankle to keep the foot all the way flat on the ground without bending your knee, right? Without kind of doing something crazy. Notice that based on the position here, I have a good bit of dorsiflexion. It's Basically, I'm having to pull my foot up towards my shin like this, or in this case, pull the shin down towards my foot. If you don't have that range, just slowly work on it, right? So your foot might want to come up. You might want to come up on the toes here, with the heel popping up. Over time, you'll learn to plant that down. Just takes time, hopefully. And again, with the other side, here we go. So now I've got the other leg, so you can see really well, I think, where my knee is. I'm blocking most of my foot from my vision. If I'm looking down towards my foot, most of it's blocked by the knee. I see my toes a little bit. And if you look at the position, my shin is mostly vertical. It might be forward slightly, but it's not way out here. It's really hard to hold this position for any length of time. This is more stable. I can hold this for a while. But if you're a novice, even this position may be challenging, and that's okay. A workout is a workout. So if this is where you need to start, great. Okay? And if you look at the distance, I got, about 2 shoulder widths between my front leg and my back leg. Depending on whom you talk to, between 1.5 and 2 shoulder widths is generally what is considered proper, right? It's a lot longer than a normal step, obviously. If your normal step is something like this, it's almost 3 times that, at least double that. Double would be about here, and I'm a little bit more than that. So that's a front stance. We often deliver blocks and punches, lots of punches from this position, here. Now you notice my body can twist a little when I do a punch, but if I'm just practicing the stance, I'm going to keep my body pretty much even so that my left shoulder isn't ahead of my right or anything. Here I am. The next stance is called the back stance, and it's called that because we have more of our weight on our back leg. This is often used as a defensive stance or a defensive position. It's also used as a starting point for certain types of kicks. Lots and lots of blocks are thrown from this position. Looking at me this way, imagine I have more of my weight on my back leg. You see that my rear leg is bent this time. My rear knee is not straight. I'm bending, kind of springing off of this back leg. It's normally said to be about a 70-30, at least 60-40. But I was typically taught 70-30 in terms of the amount of weight I'm putting on the back leg versus the front. That is to say, I don't have a lot of weight on my front leg. That allows me to pick up this front leg and snap it out really quickly. We throw a lot of blocks from this position, so it's a defensive posture most of the time. We can throw strikes from it, but it's considered, in most people's eyes, I think, a more defensive position. From the side, it'll look like this. Notice, let me back up. From the front here, I have a right angle between my feet. One foot is pointing forward, the other's pushing or pointing onto my side here. And also, the heels are lined up. If I lift my left foot, you can see my right foot, right? So instead of having a distance between the feet like this sideways, this time they're on the same line. But because this other foot's turned out to the side, I'm more stable side to side than I would otherwise be. From the side, here we are. Notice it's a much shorter stance. It's something like shoulder width, maybe a little bit more. If my shoulder width is right here, I might go as far out as here, but it's not way out here, right? So there we go. Just dropping most of my weight through this back leg. You'll notice I got my hips stacked over it. My hip's not in front of this leg or in front of this foot. It's stacked over the foot. And you notice from this position, my leg looks like a straight column. From the side, the support leg where the back leg is bent, but you can't see that really from here. And again, I have enough weight on this leg so I can pick up this one if I need to, here, to deliver a technique out in this direction if I have to. I don't have to shift too much. My weight's really far forward. I have to shift back before I can do anything. I don't want to do that. So that's the back stance. And the final stance I want to talk about is something called a horse stance or a horse riding stance. You can guess what this position might look like, and you've probably seen it if you watched an old martial arts film where they have all the students lined up, it might be 20 or 50 or 100 or 1,000 of them. They're all standing there, and something like this, right? Like they're riding a horse and they're punching. And they're making lots of noises, right? Yeah, yeah! Well, this is a good foundational position for a few reasons that I won't get into right now. They actually, as a foundation for throwing techniques to the sides, but also just teaches you to build really strong, stable legs. If you notice, If you get into this position and you've never done it before, you're probably going to feel your legs burning. That's normal. It's not an easy thing to hold forever. But what we do is we slide out. Some people start about 1.5 shoulder widths or something. I normally go wider. It's because it's what I was taught. Conventional teaching often holds that the feet go straight forward because it's formal, and formal martial arts love straight lines. The body doesn't necessarily like straight lines or right angles all the time. It might be easier for you. In fact, I'd be willing to bet it'll be easier if you turn your feet out a little bit. That's probably going to take a lot of stress off of your ankles and off of your knees. So if you need to do that, that's okay. And just sit down, right? And you can kind of swim around in this position and see how everything feels. Shift your body weight forward and back. If you shift forward, your weight's going to come onto the balls of your feet a little bit more. If you shift back, then it comes out more to the heels. You can shift to side, right? And just doing this alone can be a workout, especially if you've never held a position like this. But again, I'm sitting down. I'm not just bending the knees, shooting my knees forward. I'm letting my butt go back some too. And depending on your structure, that's going to determine how much you have to bend forward. If you look from the side, and this might look familiar for anybody who's watched my video on squat mechanics, where I was describing how your proportions are going to determine how much you lean forward and how much range you have and all of that, right? Well, I've got long legs, a big butt, a short torso. I've got a lot of weight back here, and that's going to affect how much I have to lean forward. If I try to stay upright, either I fall back or my knees have to shoot really far forward and I run out of range and it hurts, right? So I have to find a compromise here, coming down, and I have a slight forward lean here. This is what I have to do. It's important not to try to lean too far forward because remember, this is a martial art and we're trying to focus on the target in front of us, being able to respond to whatever's in front of us. So we need to see that and be able to have a posture from which we can address a threat or throw a technique, throw a strike or a block or whatever we have to do. So here we are. From the side, this is a horse riding stance. We often threw lots of techniques from this position. Just holding this for a little while is going to probably make your quads just light on fire. It's a nice little isometric, but I find that it builds a fantastic foundation for throwing all sorts of kicks. So if you want to learn to be good at kicking, it might help for you to get pretty good at some of these stances and learn how to build a strong foundation before you start doing the fancy stuff. So hopefully that made some sense. I'll do some more videos in the future on kicking mechanics, peeling back the layers on different techniques, and hopefully this makes, like I said, a little bit of sense.